Morning. So we are up to Shin Ayin Beis Seif Ches, and remember the general principles are that we're talking about a situation where you've got two Chatzeros next to each other, and if there is a brick wall between them, which is more than 10 tefachim, and divides them up, then you have to make two separate eruvin. If, however, there is a Pesach between them, or it's it's easy to access between them, then, because you've got a wall which is less than 10 tefachim, etc., then ma'arvin echod or ma'arvin shtaim. They can choose to do one or two. Now, what we're going to deal with in this sif, in sif ches, is you've got a wall between them, and you've got a ladder against each wall, each side of the wall. So therefore, that creates access, that creates a Pesach, and therefore that treats it as one chotzer, and therefore they have the choice of being ma'arv echod and ma'arv shtaim. That's essentially the principle that emerges from ches. So let's see. Kaisel sheben shtei chatzeros. You've got a wall between two chatzeros, gevaya asar l'shneihem, and it's 10 tefachim high on each side. So there's no slopes like we've discussed previously. It's just flat. Vehem et etzel hakaisel sulam rochav arba'a, and he puts a ladder next to the wall. And so too on the other side, on the other chotzer, he puts a ladder there. Even if they're not literally opposite each other, if you haven't got a distance, a gap of 3 tefachim between the two ladders, in other words, they're not necessarily exactly like that. They could be a little bit not aligned, but they're not too far away from each other. They're within 3 tefachim of each other. Then chashivek Pesach, that's considered a Pesach, and therefore ma'arvin echod oishtaim. Let's just do the Mishnah Berurah to see that. L'shneihem rotzolema mishnei hatzadin. Im ein b'neim shleisha the chashiv zeh keneged zeh, because if they're not, if there's less than 3 apart from each other, they're considered keneged zeh, because it's almost opposite each other. Chashivik Pesach, then it's considered like an access way. If they want to, they can make one eruv. They can easily go into each other's chotzer by way of the ladder. We're talking about where the sulamas reach the top of the wall, or very close to the top of the wall, within 3 tefachim, which is as if it reaches the top of the wall. And that way it's like a Pesach, and they can easily access over each other. Now, continues the Mishnah, the Mishnah Berurah, the Mechaba, Hayumuflogim, if however, if however the two ladders are quite far away from each other, so you've got a chotzer down the middle, a wall down the middle of the chotzer, and you've got a sulam on one side and a sulam on the other side, but the sulamas are not near each other, they're more than 3 tefachim away from each other, so then, you've got a problem, because you can't easily go from one to the other. However, if the top of the wall is 4 tefachim wide, adayin chashuvim kepesach, because a person can climb up one sulam, can walk across the top of the wall. After all, it's 4 tefachim wide. It's it's quite wide, and you feel comfortable walking. And remember, we're talking about a wall which is 10 tefachim high. It doesn't have to necessarily be very high. Adayin chashuvim kepesach. Then it's still called a Pesach, says the Mechaba. Ve'im ein lerochav arba lo chashivik kepesach, says the Mishnah Berurah Samach Daled. Shleisha tefachim vuadin. If the sulamas are more than 3 tefachim apart from each other, even if it's very far apart. In other words, you've got the ladder over there on one side of the wall, and the ladder 10 meters away on the other side of the wall. But if the top of the wall is 4 tefachim wide, that's still considered a Pesach, because I can easily climb up one ladder, go across the top of the wall, and then go down the other ladder and access the other side. Says the Mishnah Berurah Sif Cotton Samach Dalet Shleisha Tefachim Vuadin Afinu Hayim Mufruk Tuva Adayin Chashuvim Kepesach Tekivin Shu Rochav Arba Tefachim. But obvious, since the width of the wall is 4 Tefachim, Noach Lehishtamish Alav, it's easy to use. V'yochel Lahilich Misulam Sulam Derech HaKoisa, you can go up the sulam, across the wall, across the top of the wall, because it's nice and wide, and then down the sulam on the other side. Okay, weiter in the Mechaba. So what type of ladder are we talking about? It's got 4 rungs. But if it's got less than 4 rungs, not. And imkain is unless the sides and the rungs are very heavy. She'oz kovdoi kovoi, because then the heaviness of the ladder is kovea it fixes it there, and it's not going to be just taken away. So it says Mishabur Samach Vav Arba Shlivos to Sulam Kazeh. If the ladder's got 4 rungs, Mistama hu koved. Mistama, it's a heavy ladder. Ve'ena noit lemisham b'Shabbos, and you won't take it away on Shabbos. Machmas kovdei, because it's very heavy. V'alkeinu chashav kepesach, and therefore that ladder is going to stay put, and therefore it's considered a pesach, and therefore you've got 2. You can treat it as one big chotzer, and you can make 1 eruv. Pachas mikan no, but if it's got less than 3 rungs, it's less than 4 rungs, then not. Because then it's easy to take away. You can, if it's not there. Or if it's nailed into the wall, even if it hasn't got 4 rungs, it's got less than that, but because it's securely fastened to the wall, then it's considered fixed there, and therefore it will work. Because if it's heavier than normal, it's whatever it is, made out of heavy metal or something, then you won't take it away, and therefore it's fixed there, and therefore you can always access the other chotzer, and it's treated as 1 eruv, as 1 chotzer. Okay, continues the Machaba, 3rd line. If the wall is exactly 10 tefachim high, and you put a ladder against it, and the ladder is shiva umashahu, it's 7 and a bit, but meshech arba'a etzel hakoisel, for across 4 tefachim of the width of the wall, matire bein lehishtamish olav bein la'orev yachad. That works. That allows you to treat it as 1 chotzer, to either make 1 eruv or 2. Because the top of the ladder is within 3 tefachim of the top of the wall, and therefore that is sufficient. Okay, it says Mishabura, Samachtes, V'imein, Bola Hisif Khan, the Chiddush here is, Ta'af Pesulam Zokuf, even though the ladder is vertical, Asher Kosha La'alos Olov, El Rosh HaKoisel Sagi, it's hard to climb up a ladder which is vertical, but still, this would work. Ela Asara, because in our scenario we've got a wall which is 10 tefachim high, and you've got a ladder which is 7 and a bit, and so therefore it can work. But if the wall is more than 10 tefachim, lo sagi b'shiva mashu, then a ladder of 7 and a bit is not going to help you. The point is that the ladder needs to be within 3 of the top of the wall. Shiva mashu. And therefore we treat it as if the ladder is at the top, has reached the top of the wall. And we're talking about a wall, a ladder which is going to be sort of going across 4 tefachim. We're talking about the ladder. The meshech haba is going on the ladder. That it goes across 4 tefachim. Kanal b'reish hasif. Because that is the shear of an opening. The sides of the ladder will also count to this required 4 tefach dimension. The actual thickness of the rungs don't have a shear. There's no, that's irrelevant. It's sort of flush against the wall. It goes 4 tefachim across. This concept is dafka when it's standing straight. But if it's put on an angle, because remember, we're trying to get within 3 tefachim of the top of the wall. So that's only going to work if the ladder is straight, is vertical. But if it's going to be at an angle, then you've lost some of the height of the ladder, and therefore that won't work. But the point is that we're trying to engineer a situation where the top of the ladder is within 3 tefachim of the wall. Then you can use it, i.e. the kli habayis, and you can make 1 eruv k'shemidu sulam mishnei tzadin. I.e., what is the effect? What do you mean you can use it? That if I've got a ladder which is within 3 tefachim of the top of the wall, I can use the top of the wall to put my kelim from my house, to store them there, whatever it is. And if I've got a ladder on the other side, I can make bima arev yachad. I can make 1 eruv. I can treat the chotzer as 1 chotzer and make 1 eruv because I've got a pesach there. Okay, back to the Mechaba. Okar, I'm 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines down in the Mechaba. Okar chulya mirosh hakoisel. So you sort of carve out a hole, as it were, in the top of the wall, to make the height less than 10 tefachim. If you do that across an area of 4 tefachim, then it works. Both to make a Pesach that I can now make one Erev across both Chatzeros, or I can now use the top of the wall. But if it hasn't got, it didn't go across 4 Tvachim, then it's not treated as a Pesach to make it one Erev, and then it won't help me to use the whole wall. I can only use that little bit where I've carved out, but not the entire wall. Says the Mishnah Berurah Ayin Hey, Meshech Haba Rotzuleima, Hamokum Shenismait Migova Asor Tvachim Yesh Bei Arba Tvachim BeMeshech HaKoisel. So I've sort of bored out an area which goes across 4 Tvachim on that wall. Sheyochel Ishtamish B'chol HaKoisel. I can now use the whole wall. So says Mishnah Berurah, L'chayra, this is in Ayin Vav. L'chayra Im Lo Every Yachad. L'chayra, it seems that if they didn't make one big Erev for this, joint, these 2 Chatzeros. Each Chatzer made their own Erev. Surely, the fact that they've got 2 separate Erevin prohibits each one to use the top of the wall. So how can we say over here that it's possible? V'yesh Shleima, says the Mishnah Berurah, let's start in Ketani. You've got to read this bit of the Mechaber in 2 different ways, as follows. Like, you've got to divide it up. T'mashe kosev la'arev yachad mayri, shenismayet Kain kol over hakoisel v'nasa kapesach l'shneim. You've actually reduced an area of at least 4 tefachim where I can actually make a pesach, and therefore I can be ma'arv yachad. Or mashakosov sheyochel l'shtamish b'chol hakoisel, and that which he writes, you can use the whole wall. Ma'iri shlonis ma'at b'chol aviyoi and b'tzad echad. You've only done it on one side, not on both sides, not across the whole width of the wall. B'meshech haba tefachim v'nasa lezet tashmisha b'nachas. And then for me, on my side, I can use that easily. If you look at the pictures, you can see how he's borne that out on pictures 50-51. But for the other guy, it's a difficult use, and therefore we always say we give it to the person who's got the easy use. We only allow the guy to use it who's got tashmisha benachas. That if he's got 4 tefach al arba tefachim, it's got to be not just 4 tefachim across, but it's got to be 4 tefach deep as well. Ayin sham timer. Take a check there and to see his reasoning. B'chol hakoisel b'kli habayir. So marish hakoisel yeroch of arba tefachim. It's 4 tefach wide. The pachas mizeh muter b'chol gavnin l'shtamish b'chol hakoisel, because if it's less than 4 tefachim, then it's got a din of makom patur, and there's no problem. You can certainly use it. Or chudel b'sof sifov. Ela keneged. Then you can only use that little bit where you've borne out 4 tefachim. Shesham hu tashmishay benachas, because that particular area is tashmishay benachas. It's easy to use. She'emid bekarko mishtavis. You're standing on the ground and you can use it. Avl ein noyach la'alis derech olav. The Rosh HaKoisel, however, ein ba'arba mashka, but you can't use the rest of the wall because you haven't got arba tefachim. So just essentially what emerges from Ches is that if you make a Pesach between 2 Chatzeros, that enables you to be ma'ariv yachad if you want to. And not only if you've got a Pesach, if you've got a Sulam going up, if they're connected there, or at least within 3 Tvachim of each other, that works, so long as the Sulam is heavy and is going to stay there. And if it's not connected there, but you've got a width of 4 Tvachim on the top of the wall, that will also enable you to do it. Say that.